to go? Welcome everyone. Hello. I hope today we've got students, researchers, maybe some aspiring founders in the room. It's really great to have you all here. I'm Grace, I'm from Main Sequence Ventures, and I'm really pleased to be your moderator today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathering today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders joining us today. Very excited about today's discussion. We're here to explore how Melbourne University's entrepreneurial ecosystem is helping researchers and innovators turn science and research into real-world impact, which is a really brilliant space. It's important, and I think I'm excited to connect with you all to understand more about what you're doing. To start, and by way of context as to why you've got me up here moderating today, I'm a part of the investment team at Main Sequence, where I lead Atmosphere, which is our very early stage pre-seed investment fund. So we look for and invest in early stage deep tech companies. So that's companies that have research or novel science and engineering at their core. Main Sequence is a leading deep tech venture fund in Asia Pacific. We've been operating since 2017. We've got over $1 billion in capital across 3 funds, and our roots are very much in the research ecosystem. So we were founded by CSIRO, and our mission is to back game-changing deep tech companies across Australia. So we've now got 70 companies in our portfolio, and across that, we've got more than 160 research collaborations happening with those companies. And some of those companies are scaling the world today, have hundreds of employees, have raised hundreds of millions of dollars of capital and had their start in a university. So hopefully you hear some stories from the panellists today to the same effect. One thing I wanted to call out to the room was that, as many of you would know, particularly if you're in research, Australia produces world-class research. We're in the top 1% of 15 fields of research globally. However, what's interesting is that we rank 102 out of 133 countries in the Economic Complexity Index. So we're behind Uganda and Botswana, and that's based on the sophistication and the diversity of what we export. So it's really interesting. We're a knowledge economy, but we're not realising a lot of that benefit economically. So that's why today, in the discussion that we're going to have and the pathways that you can pursue in the university ecosystem are so important, and everything around university commercialisation really is central to that. It's really about what Australia's future economy looks like, but it's also about solving global challenges. And it's really one of the biggest levers that we've got. So excited to now introduce our fabulous panel, that you've got that context. The team today are going to help you understand how you can engage with entrepreneurship at the university, the commercialisation programs and capability building programs that they've got, and also how you can access funding. So first up, I'd like to introduce you to Hun Gan, who's Executive Director of Commercialisation at the University of Melbourne and CEO of the Genesis Pre-Seed Fund. If you'd like to come to the stage, Hun. Hun brings scientific and commercial acumen to early stage venture funding. He has experience across the board, from research as a VC investment director and a startup CEO, and he's led the design and implementation of a number of programs on the commercialisation and funding side here at the university. I'd also like to welcome Michael Poisel to the stage, the floor. Michael's the new Executive Director of the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre. He brings over 2 decades of global expertise in university commercialisation, most recently as Founding Executive Director of Penn Centre for Innovation Ventures at the University of Pennsylvania, where, which I think is amazing, during his tenure he participated in founding over 280 companies that raised more than $900 million in funding. So excited to chat to Michael about that today. It's incredible. And last but not least, Dr. Anushi Rajapaksa, CEO and founder of Misty, and also a part of the 2024 Tram Air cohort right here at the university. So through Misty, Anushi is a pioneering medtech company. Anushi is redefining respiratory care with their breakthrough smart inhaler. Anushi has an incredible background with deep expertise in clinical research, regulatory strategy and commercialisation. She's got so many accolades which I could reel off, but most recently she won first prize at the Nexus Future City Innovators competition as a part of National Science Week. So it's great to have Anushi here too. just keeping a phone handy for timing. We're going to start with some questions with the panel, but there'll also be time for questions from the audience at the end, and we'll keep it fairly relaxed. The intent of today is to help you understand how to engage with the commercialisation programs here at the university and the entrepreneurship program. So if you've got questions or something's not clear, save it for the end and we'll make sure we clarify it. I'm going to start with Han. Han, you've got two roles, leading commercialisation and running the Genesis Pre-Seed Fund. Can you help us understand a bit about what those dual hats mean? What is Genesis? How do these two roles work together to support founders or aspiring founders at the uni?
Great. Thanks, Grace. So actually great here up here with everyone, including Michael. So I guess the answer to the question is that at the university we're trying to provide end-to-end support to all the great researchers here. And that starts with a couple of my team and with Michael's team. So the two parts that I'm part of are the commercialization team, which is tech transfer. So we help with the identification of IP, with the protection of IP, with understanding the commercial potential of IP. And for those that IP that has a different pathway, whether it's enterprise licensing or startups, we help guide them towards Michael. And I'll let Michael talk about the great programs that he runs and the magic that happens with the founders like Anushi and Michael to work up their great research to be investable startups. And then I also lead the Genesis Pre-Seed Fund, which is a $15 million pre-seed fund to invest into pre-seed deep tech startups out of the university ecosystem. So between my two hats and Michael, we kind of provide the end-to-end support all the way from disclosure of the IP to development of the IP, which I'll leave to the expert, which is Michael, and then guide them to funders such as the Genesis Pre-Seed Fund or Atmosphere Network or UniSeed. So that's what I do. I do parts of the whole translation process, working with Michael and others.
Thanks, Han. Just for further clarity, what does it mean for someone who might have a discovery or something in the bottom drawer or the kernel of an idea? How might they engage you? Where do they start?
So the best place to start is come talk to one of us. Whether you talk to Michael's team or my team, just come to one of us because we all talk to each other and we work together and we'll help guide you. I think the main thing is to think about what you want to do with your research and then come talk to a commercialization manager and we can help you understand where you are in your process. You might be right to start, so it might be about protecting the IP before you engage. It might be you're quite developed, in which case we can guide you towards Michael and some of his programs. So I guess my key message is just come to talk to us, either someone from my two teams or Michael's team, and we'll kind of help you get to the pathway that you're after.
Thanks, Han. For Michael now, and appreciate that you're relatively new in the role, so excited to learn more about your background as well. The Entrepreneurial Centre has a dual mission. You're building entrepreneurial capability, and you're also enabling greater research translation through new ventures built on university IP. Can you explain how you deliver on those two missions, why entrepreneurial capability is important in general, and then how you're supporting the translation of research?
Well, I think there's a huge opportunity for all of the country of Australia for us to focus on innovation and the translation of all of these interesting ideas and technologies into companies, which will lead to jobs, which will lead to economic diversity, which is what we want to see. So I think there's definitely a priority and a need for all of this, and we need to make that happen. Specifically on the translational side, we want to make sure that everyone here that has a technology, has an idea, that they disclose it to the commercialization team, and that we work very closely together between business development, Han's team in tech transfer, and our team in terms of venture creators, so that when you come to us and we decide it's something that's worth patenting, that we're going to develop a commercialization strategy. How are we going to take that to market? The path to impact almost always going to lead through commercialization, and that's because it's just so expensive to get things out to the world that there's going to need to be a profit motive in there somewhere for someone. And so we need to help you along that path so that we can get to the point that what you're working on and the discovery you've made actually has the greatest amount of impact on the world. And that's what we're going to work together to do. The new tack that I'm taking on the idea of it all is that we want to be able to offer the option to anyone that has a discovery that we can actually create a company for them. So they don't have to do it themselves. They can be entrepreneurial. They don't have to be the entrepreneur. We can develop that idea into something else. And I really want to get to the point where, as a researcher, you don't even have to know what it is that your idea is going to be good for. We'll take it and we'll go out to the marketplace, poll the market, and find out what the world thinks of it, how the world sees that it could be useful, and we'll turn it into something from there.
Amazing. Just on that, and Hun sort of touched on it as well, it might be worth, just getting your view on the different ways people can engage, or become, you don't have to become a founder. You can license technology. You sort of touched on it a bit, Michael, but it'd be great if you could expand on the different pathways that you can pursue to get to a commercialisation outcome.
Yeah, it's easy for me to sit here and say that everybody should start a company, and I do believe you should. But there are lots of different ways to get a technology to a place, whether it is through us engaging licensing opportunities. And if you disclose the technology, what we're really trying to build, Han and I are trying to build a culture in the group that as a team, we don't make a decision right away. We're not going to look at something and say, this is clearly a company, this is clearly a license. Let's try to do both. Let's see what we can do to find an opportunity. And so for a lot of the technologies, it's going to either end up being a license right away or be put into a small company and licensed later. But there are other ways of commercialization. I worked with someone once that it turned out the best way for them to commercialize their research was through a book. And so we helped the researcher write a book around what they discovered. So there's lots of different paths it can take. We just want everyone here to know that we're a resource for you, that we're here to help you make it happen. And we want all the work that you've done to impact the world. I'm sure that's a lot of what you're doing. And we're here to try to help make that happen for you and with you.
Thanks, Michael. I've got one more question for you before I want to move to Anushi. We talked about at the start how you launched or had a hand in launching 280 companies in your previous role at University of Pennsylvania. Would love to understand what you learnt while you were doing that work that you could bring to the University of Melbourne. Like, where do you see that you've talked about potentially helping create the companies? What are the other opportunities to drive kind of translation and commercialisation outcomes that are on your mind?
Well, I think one of the big things I learned through that process is something that Han and I are working on, which is that we need to build that trust relationship with the researchers. They have to make sure that they can believe in us, that we're a partner to them, and that we have their best interest in mind. We have their technology's best interest in mind. I found through all my time at Penn that if a researcher had 4 or 5 different projects they were working on, giving one of those to us to commercialize was easy. It's like, sure, I've got 4 more, you take that one and do something with it. But when it was a researcher's only project that they've been working on for 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years, going to them and saying, you stay there, just let us have it, and we'll go take it and turn it into a company. It's like, oh, wait a second. And and it's not just understanding their perspective, but understanding why that's true. Their reputation is based on their research, and if we go and try to commercialize what they're working on and something goes wrong, it could be a hit to their reputation. It's not just, if a clinical trial goes wrong, well, was it the technology didn't work, or did we not design the trial well? And so it is really important that they do trust us and that we are responsible for the role that we have in helping to make sure that what they're working on actually gets to the world.
Totally agree. And that's a nice segue to Anushi, who is someone who is deeply embedded in the university and research ecosystem, who became a founder. Anushi has 12 years in clinical research at the Royal Children's Hospital and MCRI. Would love to understand from your perspective, Anushi, well, actually, I've got 2 questions. I'm deviating a little bit, but would love to understand what made you make the leap, and then also what in the university ecosystem helped you to do that.
Thank you so much, Grace, and it's such a great opportunity to be here. So 12 years at RCH and MCRI, I was leading a lab and I set up what's called a biosecurity level 2 facility. And I guess over the years, what really helped me is building that scientific rigor and confidence in research. But the leap didn't happen accidentally. It was building over the years, I would say. Personally, I am needle phobic. I have a son who has a number of respiratory conditions, and the company was born out of that frustration, I would say, for years, feeling that a product should exist to be able to provide hospital-grade care, respiratory care at home. And we realised that through research that this problem wasn't addressed, and the discovery underpinning this work was during my PhD, which dates actually 12, even before I started at Melbourne Uni. So, but the university really probably helped me ask the right questions. And I think that was probably the number one thing that I learned why it took so long. Everyone would ask that. But fundamentally, for me personally, why I took that leap was because I felt like, it was over a decade of research that I've been leading, and I felt like if not now, then when? If not you, then who? So I kind of relied on a lot of mentors, and like Michael and Han said, sometimes you question whether you are the right person to lead that, but you kind of will know, and the mentors will guide you even if you don't have all the skill sets. You surround yourself with people like Han and Michael, and is an amazing ecosystem, particularly in the university, to support you to kind of, if this is your passion, then you do take that leap of faith and kind of run. For me personally, I found that academia was not really allowing me to commercialize a product, and although it had the right metrics around publications and providing really good knowledge for progressing the field, developing a product was not something that was within the KPIs. And I had an early career fellowship as part of NHMRC, and I set up a fantastic lab, and I had great collaborators, within Australia and the US. But actually, all of those connections helped me to actually form this startup as well, because the research is very much the foundation, and the science is very much the foundation, and that rigor that you take on will help you with the startup, or no matter what you do.
Maybe Anushi, just on that, could you reflect, was that some of those mentors and connections, was that a part of the TRAM program? Could you touch a little bit on what that experience was like and how it helped?
Yeah, so I actually didn't realise that TRAM existed until quite later on in my journey.
That's translating research at Melbourne.
Yeah, so translating research at Melbourne, and I was an honorary research fellow at Department of Paediatrics for 12 years. I was part of the early mid-career researcher committee, so I was really part of nurturing the PhD research, and I was a supervisor for researchers, clinical researchers, but even within that, I was mentoring someone, and it was actually quite bad that I didn't know until quite later on. But the TRAM in particular TRAM Air in particular that we were part of was actually recommended to me through a prospective investor that suggested, because we'd done Start Made, which was a Launch Week funded program, and that they have a lot of mentorship program, particularly geared towards broad range, but TRAM was really more geared around deep tech and scientific research that is aligned with the University of Melbourne. And through that, we had entrepreneurs in residence and a whole lot of community members, including introductions to investors. That was really, really critical for us to not only really validate our business idea, but really just get customer feedback, because that was really something that a lot of researchers don't do really well on. Really go and talk to, for me, it meant that I had to consult the world expert in my field who discovered the COVID-19 vaccine. I actually sent an email to her and really just wanted to check, is this an idea that I should invest my next 5, 10, potentially more years? And it has to be informed by someone from a large pharmaceutical company who will then validate the need. Otherwise, why would you do it? So that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, we see with a lot of the early stage companies that I work with, the market understanding and kind of market validation is really important. But I think one thing for the room, from my perspective as an investor, that I think the university kind of ecosystem and the commercialisation and entrepreneurial programs can help with is just learning the lingo. VC and commercialisation language, you're probably experts in your field, some of you, or you might be students working on something very specific. I think one of the things that we see often is that researchers tend not to reach out to venture investors because it's a whole new world. It's a whole discipline in and of itself. And so I think one of the things that can't also be understated is learning the language. We know, and the commercialisation teams know, that you are leading in your field. But we don't expect you to know what a safe note is and how to raise capital and all of those things, which is one of the things I think I see and my colleagues see is it can really put people off from kind of entering entrepreneurship, because it's hard to engage. I remember when I got into this world and I was like, what's a safe note? What's a con note? It's a lot to learn, but there are people who are here and there's a lot of resources if you put your hand up to say that you want to learn. So I just thought that was also worth adding. Alrighty, let's keep moving. Han, I want to talk a little bit more about Genesis. So Genesis, I'm sure for some of the folks here, is a pre-seed investment fund run by the university. Can you help us understand a bit more about the Genesis mandate? What are you looking for? What does the process for investment look like?
Right. So Genesis Fund, we're a $15 million fund and we cover all sectors. So we cover the whole research base of the university ecosystem. And what we're trying to do is help great founders like Anushi take their ideas and fund the creation of businesses to help them take the next first steps out of the university out to do what Michael's saying, which is build the commercial engine around the great science so that you can actually translate it for impact. And so that's what we're looking for. And we're looking for obviously great science, but we're actually looking for great founders like Anushi. And the great benefit you get working with Michael and his team, for example, is to get that impact, as Michael was saying, it's bringing together lots of different things, not just the science, it's what the product looks like, it's how do you get to the end user. And that whole process is what we fund. You know, we fund the investment so that the work that Manushi's done with the TRAM program to develop that plan to get something out to the end user, we're funding that so that you can take your first steps towards that. And really, we're trying to get you out of the ecosystem to the next round investors, you know, next round investors like Atmosphere. And I guess one of the questions I would have for you then is, you know, that's what we look for. We look for great founders and a great problem and great science and looking for a story of how they get there. And then we're trying to get them to the next round investors, which is you. So it'd be great to ask you a question back, which is, you know, what do you look for? If something comes out of Genesis with some funding, what do you look for to help, you know, our audience here understand the journey that you then help them take?
Yeah,
that?
I think.
Good question, Rob.
I think that's a good question. And for context, Han and I know each other well, and we do work closely with the Entrepreneurship Centre. And so there's a whole number of things, and we love being embedded in the university as well. Like, as I said earlier, research and the university ecosystem is really core to what we do as an investor. So there's a few practical things with the investor hat on, which is around, you know, pipeline generation. You know, we're looking for the best opportunities. We're looking to find, you know, one of my colleagues calls it like truffle hunting. You know, we're trying to find the really interesting things that are really hard. The university's huge. Like, it's really hard. We're a team that covers Australia and New Zealand, and we're across the university ecosystem. So Han and the folks up here are really help us as venture investors, and I know other peers in the market get connected into great opportunities. So I think there's a pipeline, but also I think it's helping us understand what we need to do to uplift capability too. So we work really closely on, you know, how do you capital raise? We run sessions as well because we want to uplift the capability coming through. We know, you know, to Michael's point earlier, we know not everyone's going to be a founder of a company, but there is that entrepreneurial capability uplift that we also want to see, because we've got folks. I mean, I work with someone who is a scientist, a PhD, who's now a venture investor. We've got really talented people in C-suite roles in our startup companies that were researchers, you know, and they've looked to take a different role in a startup. They haven't necessarily founded it, but they're a part of the growth journey. So as Michael said, there's lots of ways to engage, and we also want to see that capability uplift. But I think one of the most important things, I think, from a university perspective, which we try to work on as a small team, but I think the University of Melbourne does really well, is it's the entrepreneurial mindset. And so most of the founders I work with are technical founders and research founders. And it's that, you know, it's a journey to kind of learn something new and to change the way you think. And there is I think often actually, there is a very scientific approach to building a business at times. You know, you can kind of contrast them, but I think the mindset piece and the work that you guys can bring to help people understand, well, what's the journey actually going to look like, and what are the supports, and you know, what's the path ahead look like? That's really, I think, how we like to engage as well. But it's like a doorway.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I asked you the question is, I guess, to just reinforce that there's a whole ecosystem here support you from the start to the finish. You know, and it starts with my team, and then Michael, and it moves to Grace's team and outwards. It's actually for all sectors, you know. So you asked a bit about the fund. So we have 15 investments into 7 sectors, including a first social enterprise investment. And the TRAM program, what we do, actually the steps, the impact are the same, whether you go through a license or you go through a startup. The questions are the same, the thinking is the same, the path to market's the same. So that's what we all look for, right? And as Michael said, we want to help talk to you about what then the best pathway is. But the thinking's all the same, so we just want to talk to you about that journey and then help you along the way.
Thanks, Han. Thanks for the question. Michael, we talked a little bit about entrepreneurial mindsets. Would love to get your thoughts on, I guess, firstly, what that means from your perspective, also thinking about what you saw at Penn, but also how it's relevant, you know, for people who don't want to pursue the founder pathway. Why would they want entrepreneurial skills, and how does MEC, you know, think about building capability across different disciplines? Sorry, it was a big question.
No, because there is, you want to be thinking about the research you're working on and how that applies to the world, and that it's not just about publishing a paper that's going to be filed somewhere. And so from that standpoint, when you think about impact, many times, and I would maybe even say most of the time, that it's going to go through a path of commercialization. And so entrepreneurship is one of the ways to be able to do that, whether it's applying for government grants for a small business or pursuing venture capital, different ways that you can get additional money put behind your research to do applied research, to be thinking about how does this basic discovery turn into something that actually impacts the world. And so I think understanding all of that is great. Even if you don't become a founder, maybe someone will take your ideas and move it forward, and for you to understand what they're going through and how it works. Where we're going is creating, you know, MEC Venture Studio, where we'll actually build the businesses for you. But even in that situation, it's good for you to understand the entrepreneurial path for a couple reasons. You want to be able to know what you're in for and what the company's trials and tribulations are going to be, but also so that you can understand the value that the management team is bringing to your company, how hard it actually is to build a business, and have respect for what they do. I often talk about a theory that a couple of researchers put forth many years ago called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and that's that the less you know about something, the more you think you're an expert in something. So I would love it if we can teach everyone how hard it is to be CEO of a company, so that they can respect the value that a good business plan, a good management team can bring to your venture.
Amazing. I totally agree. Could you, on a practical level, and getting maybe a bit more down to the programs, if I can put you on the spot, talk a little bit more about MEC specifically and how that's bridging the gap? We've talked about TRAM a little bit, but maybe just on a practical level, how do people engage with the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre? What are the key programs that they should be aware of?
Yeah, and moving forward, one of our goals is to simplify an understanding of how you enter the MEC world and what the point is of engagement that you go through. And we're going to be launching this whole strategy on November 5th. And so that will make it much clearer to everyone that this is your entry path into MEC. But today we have the MAP programs, which are for students and alumni, and TRAM that is for researchers, is sort of the idea. And on the TRAM side, it can be for researchers that aren't yet in motion and for researchers that are. So if you already have a business in motion, we can help you with that. If you haven't gotten there yet, we can help you there. So we have different programs wherever you are on your entrepreneurial journey. I assure you we've got a spot for you. Today, it may not be readily apparent what that spot is. We'll help you with that. But going forward, we're going to clarify so that everyone easily understands that if I have an idea, a business, a technology, this is how I know to engage with MEC. But I think it's important that if you are on the research side, that the first point of engagement should be with Hans Group to disclose the invention that you have. And then together, we'll work together to bring the idea, if it merits it, to come over to MEC.
Super helpful, thank you. Hopefully everyone's hearing there's an amazing ecosystem at the university. Again, have an Australia-wide view, and what's going on here is really world-class. So great to take advantage of it now that you've got clarity on how to enter. on a more practical level, Anushi, could you talk to, I guess, like what are some of the things that you wish you knew, or some of the programs and things, you know, we've talked about TRAM, are there other resources or things that were of benefit to you when you were starting off Misty?
I think the key thing that I realised that I cannot do it alone, and a lot of the time I think to, you know, your point about, you know, not, you know, what you don't know, don't underestimate what you don't know, especially, you know, I was just giving some advice as, like, I had some colleagues from research who were wanting to explore commercialisation or startup world, and they, you know, and I told them, prepare to work 10x, because I think that it isn't what people think it is, because, you know, at times I'm taking calls with the US, you know, which is early in the morning. At times I'm talking to someone in Europe. So it isn't a linear path. And, you know, you might have to take calls on the weekend. You might be traveling. So people think doing the research is the hardest part. But it's actually, you know, I'm telling you right now, it is not. I mean, it is a hard truth to swallow, because the commercialisation road, you know, there's a lot of skeletons. If you look in, you know, I learned all of that through the TRAM programs, because, you know, people underestimate that the hardest part is done, but it really isn't. The hardest part is ahead of you. So the research is good, but, you know, building a commercially viable product not just stands on good science, but also on good strategy in terms of commercial viability and building the right people around you. So that's number one, and it's non-negotiable. So for me, I wish you know, what I would have done sooner is probably going to hunt earlier. You know, and have people like Michael, you know, around a lot earlier, because what you don't know, it comes down to what you don't know, and probably understanding that a lot earlier. And, you know, we're also part of Juma Bioincubator, and through that we had, you know, programs like Accelerate, which actually, you know, the right mentors, and I think it's the really key part, you know, people who've done it before, or who are ex-founders, or who have research background, really just getting their advice earlier on, and making sure that you know what's ahead of you, and talking to customers a lot earlier. So that's something I would have done earlier.
Yeah, amazing tip. We're nearly there, but before we kind of head to audience questions, I've got a couple more things. I want, maybe Michael, I might throw to you, just given your previous experience as well, would love to, if you could share, you know, there's some case studies or some stories about companies that you know, have spun out, or even at the University of Melbourne, noting that you've only been here for a short time, or in previous roles, just to help the folks here understand, you know, what the pathway can look like when things go well.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of stories, so it's rattling through my head of which ones to pick. I guess on the pure research side, I think a good example for how this can work is a researcher that came to me and said that he had a new way to produce hydrogen. And I looked at him and I kind of said, okay, it's interesting, but who cares, right? It's hydrogen. He's like, well, you can take that hydrogen, you could put it into a fuel cell, and now you have clean energy. I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of ways to produce energy. Who cares, right? We have to come up with, why is the world going to care about what you're doing? But the way my model worked, and what I want to try to institute here, is to say, we can stop there, we'll start a company, and we'll have the company try to answer that question, not put it on the researcher to have to figure that out. We started a company, hired a CEO, he did market research, we did a lot of validation, and he came back and said, it's interesting, but drones, flying robots, don't have the energy density to be able to carry packages like Amazon wants over long distances. So they have very short lives, they can only fly for about 20 minutes, and they can't carry a heavy load. But if we could put one of these fuel cells on top, it could fly for hours. And so now there's a problem statement. The problem is drones don't fly long enough. We have a solution, these fuel cells, that are based on the technology of the researcher. So to me, that's a great example of how the researcher develops something really cool and interesting, but us as a team can help them to figure out how does that impact society? What is the actual problem statement that technology can solve? And that's the relationship that I want to bring here, that we have that relationship with researchers and how we do things. And you know, be able to build a business on that we eventually got funded and operational. And so that's the kind of one of the stories that I think is representative of how I'd like to see our relationship be here.
Yep, totally. We say that a lot as well, you know, and often it can take a few goes to figure out what the use case might be. Han, I know you've got lots of case studies in your pocket. Would you like to share with maybe a Genesis case study or?
Yeah, I'll probably talk about a couple just to give the audience a feel for this is a journey I think that everyone can make. So upstairs we've got a startup team, Kelly Healthcare, where the founders are Fiona and Emerson, and Fiona was the supervisor of Emerson's PhD, and it's actually on the basis of Emerson's PhD that they created a pregnancy monitoring medical device system. One of our investments, Garen Dodds, he's a professor at the university who did some research on metabolic pathways, and there's a startup where he's staying in his lab, and they're creating a team around the startup. And then we've got a Flowing Bee. It's a marketing SaaS solution where we've got 2 PhD students who've gone out and created their own business. So in terms of this, I'll just probably talk a couple of stories where if you're thinking of doing it, you know, if you think about there are examples of people just like you who've done it. You could be the head of a lab, you could be one of the PhD students, you could be an alumni, you know. So it's a pretty exciting journey, but probably running the technology is probably the great range of founders that we see in the portfolio.
I think the other thing, just adding to that, Han, that we see a lot is sometimes there's folks who are researching in a particular field, or they've got something that they don't think has market relevance, and it may do. So we've seen a number of companies, you know, as I said earlier, we work closely with Cyro. We've got companies that, you know, someone had something sitting in the bottom drawer that was old research that they didn't think was relevant, and is now a 200-person company that's approaching an exit. You know, because we kind of found an industry partner who said, we have this problem. We went to Cyro and said, does anyone have some capability in this field of research? They said, yeah, oh yeah, that's in the bottom drawer, filed away. We don't, you know, we're not looking at that anymore, and it's now a major company. So I think the market piece that everyone's touched on is really important, but also there might be things, I think even just engaging to understand, you know, what's Han and Michael and, you know, hearing from investors or from industry partners, there might be problems that, you know, you haven't heard about, but the team have heard about, that your research or your ideas are a really good fit to solve. So if you're interested, it's just worth engaging with the community. Final question for the panel. For the folks in the room, what's the one piece of advice or the takeaway that you hope that they leave with today?
I'll have a try. Okay.
That's a hard one.
I think it's something that I think it's got sometimes got a mystique to it. I think this journey that we're all about translating research, whether it's around a startup or licensing, for the researchers out there, it's a very well-known process. It's known steps. You know, if you're used as a researcher to doing experiments and then find results and then responding to that and then failing and trying again, that's really what it is. You know, so I guess my advice would be, if you're interested, go for it, because it's actually an exciting journey, but it's actually not as mysterious as you think. And as people like Michael who can help along with my team, and Ushi's done it. So probably that might be my thought on it.
Thanks, Sam.
I think my tip is that you probably don't have to give up your role to give it a try, because I didn't. I did go from, because I was raising kids, I was a part-time researcher while setting up a lab, and was on that kind of traditional track of becoming the A-prof, the prof, you know, because I was there for so long that, you know, they might earmark you. That's your journey. And my bosses all did that. But I often had this kind of, you know, riddle sparkle that I'm like, oh, what about this world? You know, what do they really do? And it doesn't mean that you have to give up everything and do it, but you can kind of explore that while you're in that, or maybe cut back your, you know, appointment to fractional, like go 2 days or something, and then explore this, and then you can gradually like become that founder, or, you know, take a C-suite role or whatever you might prefer, but don't wait for too late. Like don't like kind of, oh, maybe I'll do it next year, I have no time. But you might not know when the market's ready for your technology, because things come in waves, and you just have to be at the right point at the right time. And like, just if you have that knowledge, you never know what could be on the other side.
Yeah. So. Thanks, Anushi. That's great.
I think the thing to remember is University of Melbourne is a special place. It has so many resources here, and look at us and Han and myself here as a resource for you. We can't make the process of entrepreneurship and commercialization easy, but we can make it easier. Our role here is to reduce that friction and help you to get over those inhibitions about doing this. We can definitely help. We're here to hold your hand physically if we have to. We're going to help you get there. It's going to be okay. And so we're here. Please reach out to us.
Maybe that's a lovely note to end on, I think. All right, we're ready for audience questions. Did anyone?
Hello, hi. My question for the panel is a bit twofold. So I think there is strong motivation that us as researchers pursue industrialization, as you're mentioning. And I've only, by the way, joined Unimel from Sydney recently, like in the last couple of months. And the model that some of the academics were thinking about there, and a couple of academics of my colleagues have actually done that, is to use commercialization as an avenue to pinpoint where the gap is, rather than just relying or being isolated in your research bubble, which is essentially what some of you are saying, right? And have some of those PhD students that work on it then propagate that in their own after graduating, right? But my question then is about the university's infrastructure and systems. So I think Anushi mentioned that she struggled a little bit or found that the KPIs in the current system, the system as it is not very supportive for academics and researchers to pursue these pathways, right? So has that changed since then? And is there projected transformation of how that will become in the future? That's the first question. The second question is, one of the things academics have faced who've tried to industrialize the work is struggling later on generating enough capital for scaling. VCs would just be scared of, knowing that universities maintain a big ownership of that IP or of that company. And so is there again a transformation or a change in the way this is going to be developed in the university to help endorse or encourage more academics to pursue this?
So part one's about the culture shift. Maybe do we want to focus on that first?
Yeah. So there is a big focus in the university around translation. That's from Councillor and Vice Chancellor down. So to pick your question, there is in the academic promotion framework promotion criteria based on commercialization. It's actually there. It's not well known, probably not used as much as it is, but if you do look within the university academic promotion framework, it is actually there, and it is a bigger part of the conversation now. And I think the other thing that drives this is if you look at historically the career pathway of researchers, postdocs, very small percentage actually go on to have academic careers. 90-something% have pursue other careers after that. So I think it's all part of that development of your career pathway.
I agree to what Han said. So in my research role, I was actually had an HMRC development grant as a CIA, and that was very much around the commercialization pathway, although it was a completely different project to Misty. We exhaust, I guess, that, whether it's a license or whether it's a company. So, we explored that, and I learned so much. So I encourage, even in a postdoc, to be part of those commercialization type grants, even with an academic focus. But because this project was quite outdated, it was like in the bottom of the drawer from my PhD, I kind of had to take it offline, which was very unique in my case. So I had to kind of put that delineator, okay, well, this is my academic role, this is my kind of startup-y role. But, if you can combine both, I mean, it's amazing if you can. Like, to Han's point, yeah, it's amazing.
And you're combining both, that's why Michael and his team are here. As you said, if you want to keep doing what you're doing in your lab and you want a partner to develop it, then I'd throw to Michael and say, he's right there to help you, really, to do it.
And in terms of the university owning a big percentage of the company, I tell everyone I live by the golden rule, which is those with the gold make the rules. So the VC funds, if they don't like the cap table, they can change it. So while people may give you a hard time about what your cap table looks like, you don't worry about that unless somebody comes to you with a term sheet. If they have a term sheet, then they can complain about the cap table. Everybody else is just noise.
I can also talk to that as well. We've worked a lot with the University of Melbourne, we've worked with other folks. There isn't really a consistent like equity position that universities take across Australia. I also don't necessarily think that would work in practice. Oh, switch the mics, sorry. Sorry, Michael. I also don't necessarily think that would work, but I think it's not a deterrent. All of the companies in our pre-seed fund, I think 7 of 8 are university spin-outs. We've managed to get to terms with all the universities, and we're a venture investor. We invest on the journey. You know, some of our companies that have spun out of research institutes and universities are Series B plus and beyond, and it's not an issue. Of course, sometimes there's challenges in negotiations, but that's what you're negotiating for. So it's not a deterrent. It's not a problem. Certainly there are challenges at times, but you know, it's fairly well known. You know, there's not a standard equity position, but there's sort of parameters that we all work to, and yeah, I don't think it's an issue from a venture. And, you know, some investors don't do deep tech and university spin-outs, and some do. So I think that's worth noting. And some of our companies, just for context, I was just looking up to see if I could get the dollar amount for you, but we've got companies that have raised globally. You know, there's a company, Q Control, in our portfolio. It's a research spin-out. They've raised over $160 million US. They're scaling globally. They've got major US investors on the cap table. So just for colour, it shouldn't be a barrier. Sorry. Any more questions? I can project. Oh, okay. Well, maybe.
Is that on? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it is.
My question is around truffle hunting. So I want to know what you're looking for in your truffles, in your drawers,
Yep.
and how's this balanced with the, you know, we've got internal, the push of all of these great, you know, great research that's happening at the university versus the industry pull. So what do they need? What are they wanting to see? So how do you balance that when you're looking for your truffles?
Is this the right one? I'm on. Oh, sorry. Great question. Thank you for the reference back as well. So I think to some of the discussion here today, sometimes when you've got something, you know, some of these programs can help you figure out if it's a truffle, to use the metaphor. But, you know, most of the companies I work with in Atmosphere, so that's our pre-seed fund, essentially the equivalent of Genesis. It's off the lab bench. And so we don't even know sometimes in this fund if there is something special there. We're actually working to do the validation. You know, we do a lot of company building similar to what Michael said, you know, MEC's going to evolve to. We're working to figure out what the opportunity is. I think the one thing with deep tech companies or companies that have research at the core is that they take a long time. Like it's hard and it takes time. And so we, you know, essentially you can think many deep tech investors are patient. They're looking for the market signals. We've got a company, for instance, that we met. So we don't always know. We're looking for at a high level, as similar to what Han said. Great, ambitious founding team. You know, you don't need to want to go, you know, you don't have to want to go the whole journey. We might even say to some founders, you know, at Series A, we might bring the commercial gun in. How can we keep you on the journey? You know, it might look different for everyone. We have some research founders that are on, you know, that are CEOs well into the company's growth. So it can look different for everyone. So we're looking for great ambition at the start, or a team that's willing to bring in the right folks to lead the team. We're looking for a big market opportunity, but it's just at this point a need to, you know, a belief that there could be an interesting market there. So if I can give you an example, we've got a company that there were some material scientists who we worked with at the University of Newcastle. They were working on composite materials for high pressure environments like space. One of the materials got wet one day and they were like, what's that smell? That's weird. There's something happening to this, you know, ceramic material. They took it to the chemistry department and it's producing ammonia after it got wet, which is like pretty unbelievable. They weren't thinking about starting a company, but they said, hey, that's crazy. They spoke to an industry partner that they know. They said, wow, that's crazy. And then they got connected with us and we said, we don't know if there's something here, but if you could produce ammonia with water or steam, that would be pretty groundbreaking. So, and we know that the ammonia market's huge. We don't know if there's going to be industry pull yet. We're working with them to figure it out. So I would say team, market, and something unique and defensible, or an advantage in there. And usually if it's grounded in research, often there is this sort of special source. So that's probably the high level things that we look for as like a bit of a ballpark. Market opportunity is a whole thing which you can learn more about in some of the programs, but essentially we look for venture scale opportunities, which is companies that might have the potential to get to really significant revenues, and that's what a venture investor will generally look for. But there are also other ways to fund companies to grow and other ways to fund the commercialisation pathway. So just thought that was worth calling out. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
Hi. I've already met with some of you guys, but I'm an entrepreneur that's done this a few times, and the big question I've got is, am I in the right place? Because for me, I'm trying to figure out where am I going to get talent? Where am I going to find that seed money, to get the startup off the ground and get things going? And may I ask a question of the audience? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Of all you guys, how many of you want to be CEOs and startup founders? Just raise a hand, like show of hands. Am I guessing right? This is about 25% of us? So we're all here for one particular reason. How do we get from where we are now to that first investment? My experience so far in Australia has been getting to the venture capitalists here is hard. Actually quite impossible without a warm intro. If you are just a guy off the street, you send an email, it goes into an AI-assisted rejection. and usually an invitation to join like the VC's like entrepreneur summer camp, And so the question I've got for you guys, are we in the right place?
Well, yes.
Yeah, you are.
Well, yes, you're in the right place. Let me speak for Genesis. We're a very specific target. We target a very specific audience, the University of Melbourne ecosystem, pre-seed and deep tech. So if you tick those boxes and you want to do a startup, I think it's pretty easy to find us and we want to talk to you. So I think yes. I think we're talking about the kind of dynamic where you're trying to go out to lots and lots of venture investors and they get hundreds of kind of proposals that they have to sift through. I think that's hard, but actually I think with us in Atmosphere, it's much more targeted. So I would say if you're in the kind of mandate that we have, I think it's really easy, but if you're outside our mandate, then we can't invest in you. So we're the wrong people to talk to.
Han, just on that maybe, could you talk about, and we didn't quite get to it in the panel, could you talk about other funding pathways that the university has for early stage opportunities?
Yeah. So it's not just the university. I mentioned we've more mentioned the ecosystem before. So within the university, there are proof of concept programs within BRIC, within the faculties, for example, to help you start taking the steps to develop your research into, minimum viable product that you can test. But then out in the ecosystem, there's lots of other programs that support you as well. Breakthrough Victoria's got some different programs, including 150K grants to researchers that you can use some of that to actually pay your salaries while you develop your idea. You've got Launch Week with different programs. So actually out in the ecosystem, there's actually quite a lot of help out there to help you get started. And then when you actually get to a point, there's even bigger amounts of money, whether it's through the Australian Accelerate, the AEA program, or Curator again, to help you with $500,000 checks, and then they can do $5 million checks. So there is actually money out there. I think what's hard is to be able to navigate that because there's quite a lot out there, and I think that's where the team here you can see here can actually help you. Michael's got a lot of knowledge and networks, and so does Grace, and so do I and my team. So you come talk to us, we can hopefully help you navigate through that.
If I can add to it from what Han said, when I started the journey, I had a lot of no's, and never really the AI bot knows, but really, like, not really a no, but it's like, have you thought about this? Because often a no or a maybe, I think they're all maybes. There's, it's about how you navigate that. And I think showing up consistently and going through progress. We've always been lucky with StartMade, few other stepping stones that have kind of helped de-risk a lot of because we are a drug device combination with a software. So it is quite in the pediatric space, mind you. So that we knew that we are tackling a large problem but had that potential. But we need to, sometimes gaining investor confidence requires you to do a little bit of the work yourself. If you are lucky, you can bootstrap some of that early work, and if you are in a space, you can do that. But I think persist. It is also a test that you are one of the, you have that founder gene in some ways, and you've just got to kind of work through it in some ways and figure out and get advice. I don't believe there's a true no. They're all very supportive in the Australian system, that they do want to help. That's been my experience.
We've certainly engaged with founders that we might have said no to initially. And, of course, as a venture fund, we've got our own KPIs and objectives, so we're also looking for an outcome for our own investors. But we say to our companies, and including our very early stage companies, we try to help them get as much as 50% grant funding and non-dilutive funding. So there are programs, as Han said, like the Australian Economic Accelerator, the Industry Growth Program. There are a lot of the common ones that our companies will go for. There is venture funding available, but also we want to see that there's a idea with some market pull. We kind of want to see the signals as well. So we're coming up to time. I'm getting the nod. If there's more questions, I think maybe a few of us will hang around afterwards. But really, thank you everyone for coming today. Hopefully it was helpful. Thank you to the MEC crew for pulling the event together, and hopefully see some interesting ideas coming through the pipeline. We'd all love to chat. Thank you. Oh, and thank you to the panellists. Yeah, I was so carried away with my timing, but Michael, Anushi and Han.